Welcome to SFGovTV's In Person. My name is Maria Peña, and we're here at the Indigenous Peoples Cultural Arts Healing Center in the Mission District. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Fantástico. Buenas tardes.
Blessed.
Can you please introduce yourselves?
My name is Roberto Hernández, and I'm the CEO of CANA, Cultura y Arte Nativa de las Américas.
And I'm Rodrigo Durán. I'm the Executive Director of Carnaval San Francisco.
I'm Roselyn Garcia. I'm the Festival Coordinator for Carnaval San Francisco and the Program Manager for the Mission Food Hub.
Well, thank you very much for joining us in this episode. And Roberto, I want to just dive into it right away. Roberto, tell me about yourself. Tell me where you grew up, the kind of work that you do, the need that you see in the community. Just tell us about your involvement and all the grassroots work that you do.
Born and raised here in the Mission District, and I still live here. I'm blessed. On Florida Street, actually, not too far from here. And I started off learning how to become an organizer one summer when I was a chavalo. I got sent by my jefito to Delano, California. And I had no idea what I was going to be doing. And it was right around the time when the United Farm Workers Union was formed by Cesar and Chavez and Dolores Huerta. And so I met them at a very young age. And after that summer, it transformed me completely, just being around those two little angels. Because they really fed my heart, my soul, my spirit, and my mind in so many different ways, because I didn't like myself, you know. I hated school, you know. It was a time when racism was worse than it is now, if you could believe it. We were forbidden from speaking Spanish in school, and I got in trouble for that. So I was taking a little left turn, you know, right in the streets, and I'm really grateful to mi papa, and I want to honor him and for having sent me. And that was the beginning. You know, I became an organizer for the UFW at that young age. When the great boycott was happening, I was in charge of one of the Safeway stores, in charge of the picket line.
How old were you?
I was like 14. And then I got involved with the Mission Coalition organization, and then I got involved with RAP, the Rural Alternatives Program. Eventually became the director there, and I started an alternative high school called Si Se Puede. And at that time, there was a lot of cholos and cholas, and over 300 of them had been suspended from school or expelled. And so I went to the superintendent and said, this is criminal that you're depriving these young people from an education. And here's a curriculum that I've created along with some professors at Stanford University, and I want to start an alternative high school for them. And here's a vacant property that the school district owns at 1950 Mission Street, which is some empty bungalows that was in there. And I got some teachers who were willing to teach these young people. And so he, surprisingly enough, read the whole curriculum and said, God, if I was a teenager, I'd love to go to the school, right? And so I created a biology course around oil and gasoline, and a chemistry course, and a math course. And then, of course, the reading was like you would read Lowrider magazine, right? There are books about Zapata and Pancho Villa, and you know, and then
Rebels.
Yeah, and you're a rebel, you know, you're Cholo, you're a rebel, you know, and so hand in hand, right? And so we, and then I had a mural painting class, so that was your art class, so you learn how to paint, and that was the beginning of the school. We had an 86% success rate. The other 14% were so far behind academically that there was just no way that they were going to be able to graduate. So I started a GED program, and I was able to convince the government here in our city, PIC, which at that time was called the Private Industry Council, and the director of that department, I gave her a proposal and said, give me funding so I can take these young people and get them a GED education over 18 months and give them a little money so that they can, jump on the bus, buy us clothes, feed, have breakfast and lunch, and pay for the teachers. And she already knew about the school program. She goes, I normally would not fund this, Mr. Hernandez, but knowing that you've done so well over there, I'm willing to take a risk. She goes, but you got to make sure that all 30 of them graduate. She goes, and you're not going to administrate the test. City College will administrate the test. And I said, done deal. But then you are going to guarantee them a job, right? So we made a deal. 18 months later, they all graduated from City College with their GED, and she got them a job. And then I started an alternative group home, because at that time, Black and Latino young boys were being sent to Hidden Valley Ranch, and then to Log Cabin Ranch, and then to California Youth Authority. And I tracked, 30 of them, and majority were eventually landed up in San Quentin. So basically it was a pipeline to prison, right? And so I convinced the judge at that time, was African American, Judge Kennedy, may he rest in peace. I said, look, Judge, here's the data. Why are white young boys being set free and Black and brown kids are being, I said, I'm calling for a grand jury investigation. And so sure enough, the grand jury did investigation and documented what I was stating based on the data that I had was true. And so he says, well, what is the solution? I said, I want to start a group home. I said, you can give him a sentence, whatever you want to give him. And he, because he was the head judge, so he talked to the judge and said, okay, we're going to start sending, young people who commit crimes to this La Casa de Alternativa. And there we had a 94% success rate, and so we already had the school, so they got to go to school. We got a part-time job, and then part of their giving back to the community was volunteering, so that if you did something to a merchant, then you had to go volunteer for them. If you did something to your neighbor, you had to go clean their backyard or do something, So it was a way also educating them to take responsibility for whatever they'd done. Mm-hmm. And then I left and started the Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center up on Cortland Avenue, about 2 buildings, and started a senior program, a youth program, and a Head Start program. And I had no intention of staying there, but just using my skills to organize the community. So we organized 10,000 people in the community, and they were the ones who were empowered to run the center, and eventually found somebody from the community to become the director. But in that time period when I was at RAP and at Bernal Heights, I was involved in Carnaval as a volunteer. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with Carnaval, because when I was a little boy, I used to watch I Love Lucy, mm-hmm. and I loved Ricky Ricardo, mm-hmm. and I loved the way he played the bongos, and I loved his big old Roomba shirt, and I wanted to be like Ricky. So my neighbor actually were these big Black men, and they would play congas in front of their house all the time, barbecue, and they spoke Spanish, and me being naive, I told my papa one day, I said, how come they speak Spanish so well? He goes, son negritos de Cuba, and where's Cuba, right? And he pulled out a map and educated me about it, and then taught me about slavery and the mezcla of the Indigenous and the Africanos. And he said, well, I don't know how to play congas. Can you go, tell them to teach me? And he said, did God give you a tongue? I go, yeah. Did God give you boca? Sí. He says, prepare, march yourself over there. So I did. I went over there and knocked on the door. And the big guy, I put my hand out and said, hola. I'm Roberto, and I want to learn how to play congas. And he invited me in. I landed up having dinner with them, and we became friends. So at a young age, I started playing congas. And then they started taking me to Aquatic Park, because Aquatic Park was known back in those days for rumbas in Dolores Park and Golden Gate Park. And the hippie movement was going, so we'd go to the Panhandle. And I mean, I got exposed, man, with them, just like so much, and just about music and people and culture. And so when one of them that I met, Marcus Gordon, said, "Hey, let's throw Carnival." I was like, "I'm there. What do you need me to do? I'll volunteer."
Was that the seed of the Carnaval that we know today?
Yeah. So Marcus organized all the congueros and the drummers and the musicians, and Adela Chu was the one that did the choreography and did the dance rehearsal with all the dancers, and that was the birth of Carnival at Presida Park. And then the second year was at Dolores Park, and then the rest is history, right?
So all this history of you from a very young age, being exposed to injustices and volunteering and just really seeing the need there for grassroots and community organizing. Tell us how was CANA born, and tell us, for the viewers that don't know the name of what organization it is, what's CANA and how did that start?
So CANA es Cultura y Arte Nativa de las Americas. I really felt that we needed to go back to our indigenous roots, right, and educate people about our native, because we lost that, and there's generations in our, again, going back to my education, it's like there were a bunch of lies. As I grew up, I learned that, Columbus didn't discover America, and you look at all the books that I was forced to study and learn, but it was not only with their lies, but I never learned anything about myself. And so I really felt that it was important that we, the people, take the responsibility to educate ourselves about who we are. Because if you don't know who you are, then you're really not whole, right? And so I spent a lot of time going through Mexico because of my abuelito. He told me, vete de aquí, no sos de aquí, y tienes que ir. So I went through the first time I went through the Yucatan, man, I was blown away because, my abuelito's Mayan, and I learned that we had our own dialect. We didn't even speak Spanish, and that there's 31 different dialects, right? And then I learned about ceremonia, and then I learned about, Mother Earth and Father Sky, and El Dios del Sol, the agua es sagrada. Man, it was just deep, and I just kept going back and back. And then I got invited to go to Guatemala, and I went throughout Guatemala. I went to Belize. I've traveled extensively. I mean, gone to Cuba and Brazil, and that all that has really fed me, and that's being fed helped me vision starting an organization that really not just did an annual parade, but really went deep.
So through CANA, you have several programs that have flourished under the organization. Obviously, Carnaval. Can you talk about Carnaval when it started, and then what it is now, and then there was a change in passing the baton to a next generation of leadership in Carnaval. Tell us how that came about.
So I saw that Carnaval really attracts people, right? It's like a magnet, right? And that if we take that energy, right, and just grow it, right, where it's global, and because I really felt like Carnival's like colorblind, right? And it doesn't matter if you're tall, you're short, you're big. It just and it brings people together. And so we were like a gypsy for many years because the city was saying, like, you can't do it at Presidio Park no more, Dolores Park. And then they tried us. We went to Civic Center because they told us to go to Civic Center. I hated Civic Center. I said, no, we're coming back, you know. And so we came back and we did the parade on Mission Street, the festival on 24th Street. You couldn't walk down 24th Street. It was like, you're like sardines. And so then the city said, hey, you better find something. And so I did. I found Harrison Street, which at that time was, you know, railroad tracks, had no sidewalk, no lighting, nada. You know, it was an abandoned street, you know, and there wasn't even people living on there at that time. And so I said, here it is, you know. We got the railroad tracks removed. We had sidewalks built. We painted murals. We planted trees. We beautified the street. And the beauty of all that is that it's given it's beyond a parade. It now became like the biggest open mercado, right? You know, that you can imagine, right? Where people sell everything, you know, and you know, and so that I got that influence from Latin America, you know, being in different places, right? Just being around mercados, right? And that's become economically for our barrio here in the Mission. Carnaval is the biggest economic infusion all year long for our local businesses and for our vendors, right? So that power, right? We really have built, and we continue to fine tune it and build on it,
and
right?
it's also like heavily, also the involvement from the community and the volunteers is very big, and it's grown a lot. So Rodrigo, you and Roselyn are part of Carnaval. Tell me how you became involved in volunteering and part of this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a byproduct of a lot of the work that Roberto's done since he started like at 14 years old, because I'm born and raised here in the Mission, San Francisco on 20th and Mission. And I went through the public school system. And so a lot of the art programs that were being, you know, introduced, I got exposed to those. So I would be part of Carnaval through the schools. But even before then, both my parents are danzantes aztecas. They're Aztec dancers. So, I mean, there's photos of my mom pregnant on a float, you know, in her regalia. And then there's photos of then later on as a 4-year-old on the float, drumming and then dancing. But I also appreciate cultural institutions like the Mission Cultural Center. That was my second home. That's where my dad's group used to, and still does, rehearse. But that's where I learned to do capoeira. So now I was exposed to a culture outside of my Mexican heritage. So I learned about Portuguese. I learned about music. I learned about the histories of peoples from South America. And then I took Puerto Rican salsa there, and then folkloric dances from the Andes. So growing up, I was really blessed to be in this neighborhood where it's like vibrant all the time. And then you add protests that we were involved through Danza Azteca or just personally because the Mission in San Francisco is always at the forefront of change. And I left the city after high school to study at UC San Diego. And I minored in Portuguese because I wanted to know what those songs I was singing growing up was all about. And I didn't really, you know, I ended up doing marketing as my major. But one thing I knew, I was going to travel, I was going to study abroad. And I really I thank Carnaval for planting that seed of, even though, you know, I had gone to Mexico growing up, but through Carnaval, I had gone to 23 different countries. You know, I can just taste a little bit from Cuba, from Peru, Nicaragua, and so on and so forth. So I knew I wanted to study abroad, and I did. For a year, I studied in Rio de Janeiro, at the university there, and I was fully immersed in Portuguese and the culture, and immersed in the Carnaval there, the mecca of carnivals, and drawing comparisons between what I had learned informally, because I was just involved in life doing Carnaval here. But now as a student, I was able to really compare and look at the beauty in the differences and the similarities, not knowing that I would come back home, you know, full circle and be involved in Carnaval at all. I had no idea. I came back, and my dad and Roberto, who go way back since, you know, the 80s, reconnected. And Roberto had mentioned to him that he wanted to create this cohort of this new generation of carnavalescos to learn, you know, from point A to point, the point never ends because you keep learning how to produce, how to be a cultural curator. And that's when it started in 2013. But I was dancing. Prior to that, I was doing Fogo na Hope. I was dancing with them, parading down, you know, the mission. And I was protesting as well. There was that unfortunately doesn't end, but it also kind of reconnected me to San Francisco, to the mission after being away. So since 2013, I've been part of the production team of Carnaval. And so it's been that more than a 10-year journey to be the executive director of Carnaval.
And Roselyn, you're the program director.
Festival coordinator.
Festival director. Tell us about your involvement in Carnaval and the organization, how you got involved in volunteering.
Yeah, so I'm not from San Francisco. I'm actually originally from LA. I grew up in Pacoima, California. So if you know Richie Valens, that's where I'm from.
La Bamba.
That's our landmark. And I originally came up to San Francisco for school. I went to USF for my undergrad. My major was in business, but I focused in hospitality. And it was really a culture shock for me. Growing up, I was surrounded by Latinos. I really didn't understand the minority aspect. And it wasn't till USF that I went and I really looked around. I was like, oh, like these people don't look like me. They don't know my dishes. They don't know. I couldn't relate to a lot of people. I actually had a lot of imposter syndrome my first week there, where I considered dropping out. Bring back memories. It was a tough time. It wasn't until I found a club there that I later became president of, Latinas Unidas, where I kind of took, I guess, like more ownership of and being more intentional about learning my culture, where I came from. And so I ended up minoring in Chicano Latino studies. And I just really, I didn't speak Spanish growing up. I really only knew enough to get raspados. That was my priority. But I, took Spanish classes. So I really wanted to kind of pick up what I lost in my childhood. And since then, it's really interesting because towards the end of my time at USF, a lot of people are actually recommending going to Carnaval. They're like, oh, like it's really you. We think you'd enjoy it. And the first summer I ended up staying here in San Francisco. I couldn't come because I was working full time to put myself through school. But it is kind of like a full circle moment because later on in that summer, I had won a scholarship through San Francisco Travel. And I spoke at a luncheon in front of I think it was over like 1,000 people. Wow. It was intense, to say the least. And, one of the questions that they really asked is like, okay, like why hospitality? And I just mentioned, growing up, being a hospitable person as a Latina is just second nature. I was always told whenever we had parties, I couldn't go to sleep until the last person left the house or they decided to sleep over. And so, I was like 6 years old, giving people waters. It was just, who I was as a person. And I believe I was one of the first Latinas to win the scholarship in a while. And I just remember after Roberto came up to me and he had handed me his business card, and he's like, oh, I think I have something you'd be interested in. And he just whisked away. And I reached out to him about a month after, because I recognized the name. I was like, oh, like this is the thing that people are telling me to go to. And yeah, I went to his house. I met with Roberto and Rodrigo, started off as an intern with them, got one good event with them before the pandemic hit. So Mardi Gras 2019 was really special. And then our 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And then with them, when they went to the food hub, I kind of waddled after them, and I've been with them since.
So what keeps you coming back, volunteering and doing the work and, being part of CANA?
It's fun. It's a lot of work. There's stress involved, but it's been a great journey. And every day feels like a journey because we are blessed with so many projects, from Somos Esenciales to Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble that we house here, to our new home that for me it was a 7-year journey, for Roberto 40+ year journey to have a Casa de Carnaval, but now it's the Indigenous Peoples Cultural Arts Healing Center. And then so the future just looks really bright, and coming to work every day knowing that there's a bright future just kind of, it stimulates me, and it encourages me to give back the way that I was given back from people like Roberto and other community leaders and talented folks. And that basically sums it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love what I do. I've worked at a few other nonprofits, but Ghana has always been like my home. Partially because, like on a personal level, it's what helped me get back in touch with my culture. I grew closer with my mom through my work with Carnaval, because I was like, hey, I used to do dance Azteca when I was a kid. And so when the parade happens, when we have events, I send her photos. I'm like, I used to do this. I kind of want to get back into it. And for me, it's centralized and kind of helped me root in myself here in San Francisco. And then with that, I love the mission of CANA, of not just, and Carnaval specifically, where their goal is to educate the future generations. And I want to, it's something I hold dearly because it's happened to me. So I want to make sure that kids who are growing up now, who, whether they immigrated here themselves, whether they are a first generation person here, they have the opportunity to get in touch with their culture or even explore other cultures. When people think Latin American, they really only think Mexican, but there's 20-something countries out there similar, but a quesadilla from Mexico is very different than like a Salvadorian quesadilla. Very different. And so, but yeah, I love what I do here. For me, no 2 days are the same. It's a little hectic, but I enjoy the excitedness of kind of seeing where we're going, where we're shaping, how fast we're growing. I know when I started, it was just us three. Whereas now we have a staff, we have a space, we have a permanent space. Our meetings used to be at Roberto's dining room table.
Like this.
Yeah, just like this. And now we have an office space. So it's very, Ghana has a very bright future, and I'm very happy to be part of it.
Okay.
Doesn't that work for me at all? For me, it's a way of life. Somebody asked me when I'm retired, and I said, when they bury me.
Yeah.
Because it feeds me every day. Yeah, and it's not every day. Every day is different. You're dealing with from a joyous moment to a happy moment to a sad moment to a challenging moment, right? To a scary moment, and just like, but for me that I wake up and I look forward to my day, just like I look forward to sleeping. I'm tired. I'm older and I need to sleep more.
So Roberto, you have a very good eye for identifying potential and leadership in people. How does that define the kind of work that you do? Are you always looking for someone, or you just happen to run into people and it just clicks?
Both. I'm always looking, and I really believe that you know, what I received, you know, from Cesar and Dolores, right? Like they taught us, you got to pass it on, right? And the more of us who are educated and have skills, then we can elevate, you know, our community more, right? There's not one person can do it. It takes many, hundreds, thousands of us, right? And so for me, that's been really important in my work, right? And not only with Carnaval, but in other areas of work that I do, right? Is to teach, empower, and nurture and develop, you know, leadership.
So the work that you do in identifying people, in recognizing the needs of services and resources in the community, tell us how that experience throughout the years also informed you when it came to starting the Mission Food Hub during the pandemic. What was that like? How did you work with the city and other partners to get that off the ground and get buy-in on it?
Well, if we look back, right, it was one phone call that I got from an elderly woman who told me she had lost her job, couldn't collect unemployment because she was a cash worker and she had no benefits. And she was supporting her daughter and 5 grandchildren because her son-in-law had passed away. And I offered personally go buy her groceries, and then the phone just kept ringing and ringing and ringing, you know. And then we opened up my garage and we started giving food out of my garage, and that wasn't, you know, sustainable at all. And then the pandemic was getting worse, and so I decided that we needed a bigger place, you know, because I have 2 lowriders in my garage, and I was not going to put them out on the street. So,
Of course not.
yeah, and so I knew of the 701 Alabama Street, which belonged to a nonprofit, and the space was empty, and I actually had helped them raise $2 million to, you know, to save the building. So I called them and he said, I need the keys, and they gave me the keys, and we started out of that space, out of one space in the warehouse, and eventually we took over the warehouse, right? But the and for me, having grown up with eating cans, you know, and TV dinners and food that's not healthy, which I did not know at the time was not healthy, right? But as I grew up and learned about health, I learned that that's like the worst processed food that you can put in, and that our bodies are sacred. And again, you know, going through, you know, through the Yucatan and whatnot, I learned about, you know, how sacred our bodies are, right? And so I didn't want to give out cans. I refused to give out cans or processed foods. I said, we're going to get fresh vegetables and fresh fruits, and then walking down the lane saying, hey, what would you like, you know? And a bunch of señoras said, hey, leche para los niños, you know, and I was like, hard to get, but it's a whole another story. You know, but eventually we got leche. And, you know, a señora from Peru said, hey, the pinto beans are great, pero soy de Peru, un poquito de frijolitos rojos, you know. And so we went and got red beans, you know, and then we got black beans because a couple of Cubans said, hey, lo cubano chingo, you know. And so we did. We really created a whole new model for the country, which we became, right, of culturally providing food for people, right? And what did that do is that it was a surprise element every week of the food that we were going to give away. It's like, that was like, everybody came, was like, ¿qué van a dar ahora? Y las señoras, yeah, you know, chismeando, you know, and you know, and we did from, you know, Taco Tuesday to giving masa so you can make tamales and all the ingredients.
The pupusa day,
yeah.
You know, yeah. I remember those.
And that just was magical, you know? It was like just, you know, it brought a lot of joy to people at a time that was really depressing, you know, and I really believe that food is medicine. That's what I was taught, and that's what I learned, and I know it for a fact because I know that when I'm going through my moment, food is my comfort. I call it comfort food.
Yep.
It makes you feel good. And so that in itself, I think, was just organically, happened, right? And what I shared to everybody was, it's like the Mission Food Hub. It was like this plane that took off, and we were making the plane as we were going, right? Putting in chairs and putting it just, And so the partnerships that we were able to create were just, some were forced, and I'm gonna call it like it is, because there are some people didn't believe, didn't want to do it, and they were forced to do it. Mm-hmm. But then there was a lot of what I call angels, people who just came forward and didn't take much to convince them. And there were people who just like, out of nowhere, just came. And I'll tell you quickly, there was one night that, it was a Friday, my CPA called me up and said, do not spend any more money for food because you have no money left. And this is on a Friday, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do next week? And I went and bought pan dulce, a whole bag. Couldn't wait to get home.
Did you eat it all?
As soon as I got out, I went into the mini park and started eating it. And I'm like, what a God, please help me, please. I'm calling all the spirits, los santos, And my phone rings, and this woman tells me, she says, hey, are you Mr. Hernández? You say, I said, how can I help you? She goes, I need your bank account number. I go, for what? And she goes, we're going to contribute $1.5 billion.
Wow.
I just broke down in tears. I was just like, I couldn't believe it. It's just like,
tell me where you bought the pan dulce. I should go to that store.
But that was a milagro, you know what I'm talking about? That was a miracle. And it just like, and I could just tell you all the miracles that happened, along the way of people that I never knew, right? And so what it did, it that's what made it whole. You know what I'm saying? It's like pedacito aquí, pedacito acá. And then the number of people volunteer was just like, and there was people like, I'll volunteer, but I'm not going in that building. What can I do? I said, well, go deliver food.
Roselyn, you are the program manager at the Mission Food Hub. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I started off as a volunteer coordinator back in December 2020. And at that time we had about 300 volunteers. And it was a mixture of the señoras who would bag like the rice and the beans. We did our like mercado setup. We had about 30 something drivers each day. And then throughout the years, as CANA grew and Roberto had to shift with CANA into how big it was growing, I ended up kind of just, I think, stepping into the program manager position. Food Hub for me was also very close to me. My family, when I was growing up, used to be in food distribution lines. And so, again, I feel like CANA is just a very full circle moment for me. And so I wanted to be able to give back to the community. And now, we're not as big as we used to be. During peak pandemic, we did 9,000 households every week. Funding's not the same as it was. And a lot of people have gone back to work. And so currently we only do our zip code, which is 94110. We serve about 200 households every week now, and we have about 30 volunteers, but the energy and the sentiment's still the same. It's still like a family there. A lot of those volunteers are people who used to be in our food distribution line who just want to be able to give back to the community that they work in, that they live in. And for me, it's always just a very rewarding experience. It's nice, we see these people consistently, we know their names. I've seen kids grow up because they used to be with us back when we first started, and now they're walking. And so it's a very wholesome food distribution.
And Rodrigo, during the pandemic, how did you manage Carnaval? Because it still happened in like a different iteration, but how did you take that on and to make sure that bright spot, that part, that joyous part of, of this community event stayed afloat?
Yeah, well, it first started with Roberto pivoting, obviously not only starting this whole new project called the Mission Food Hub, but then how were we going to pivot resources knowing that Carnaval as the full-blown festival wasn't going to happen in 2020? And so we asked our sponsors and partners to shift some of those resources to food, but also always keeping the arts somewhat in the forefront, because through the arts we heal, we tell our stories, we reconnect. That's the hardest part about COVID, losing connections to people and going through mental health crises. And so one quick pivot was, why don't we have the artists that are no longer going to be in the parade perform in front of the line of people that are waiting for 4 hours, for example? Let's get the mariachis, let's get the conjuntos, let's get the drummers, so we can lively up the space. And also remind folks that Carnival is never going to go away. It's always present, it's omnipresent. So then we did an online fundraiser for the Mission Food Hub, with performances. Los Tigres del Norte, performed online, and other artists like that gave back to CANA, Mission Food Hub, and Carnaval. 2021, so we postponed Carnaval in May of 2020, but we had eyes on having a health fair in September. And when we sent the proposal to the city, they called us up, the city attorney calling us crazy. You're gonna do the full-blown Carnival parade in the middle of a pandemic. He said, sir, you didn't read the memo. It's like, this is a 2-block community health fair. Still wasn't really happy about the idea of exposing people, to come out and mingle, so to speak, or party. That's how they saw it. But after a lot of conversations, Roberto, Roselyn, and I, with the city, departments, stakeholders, scientists, we finally painted the vision. We said, hey, our people are not always receiving the information and processing it the same way that you expect it to be online, on certain channels, in certain languages. Carnival's always been a convener. And so because people have trusted Carnival at that point for over 40 years, they know that if we create this safe health kind of pavilion or health fair, folks will show up. And there we provided food. Roselyn was in charge of, I think 2,000 bags of groceries on that Carnival health fair. We had in 2020 testing. So we had the Department of Public Health and Dr. Colfax at the time show up and vouch that this is a great way to incentivize folks, to educate folks in Spanish, English, and Mayan. We had, of course, our dancers. We had an economic recovery zone. So the department, OEWD, was part of it, and other employers. For folks that lost their jobs, they can find another alternative during the pandemic. So that was how we pivoted to this health and wellness event. And we did the same in 2021, a bit larger, less fear, more joy, more music, but more resources. At that point, then we had vaccines and all these other partnerships that we built from the previous year, so we can give back in a culturally relevant manner.
No, that's amazing. So I want to do a question and answer, like rapid kind of question and answer. I'm going to ask you some quick things that you can answer me like in one word, or I don't want to cause any controversy or anything. So, Roberto, burrito or taco? What do you prefer?
Burrito,
Why?
because it's wrapped.
Okay. How about you, Rosin?
Burrito.
Why?
It's more filling.
Yeah. Rodrigo?
Burrito. We are the home of the super burrito in San Francisco, and no one can compete with us.
Where's the best burrito for you?
La taqueria.
Rosin?
I believe it's called City Taqueria. It's a place near where I live. It's like right across from Safeway on Mission.
Gotta check it out. For me, it's Guadalajara in the Excelsior.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've been to all those. They're really good.
Yeah.
Okay. The term Latinx. How do you feel about that? Roberto?
I'm not an ex.
I think it's inclusive.
Yeah? How about you?
Yeah, it is inclusive. Now, some folks are arguing that the right term is Latine, since it's more inclusive of the Spanish language, and Latinos mainly speaking Spanish. It's more appropriate. Yeah, I mean, I can identify with the X, the E's, the O's, the I's, EU.
Okay, so what does the mission mean to you? In one word. If I were to say, what does the mission mean to you in one word?
Corazón.
Culture.
Legacy.
The Mission District is the hub, the landing place for immigrants from Latin America. My parents, when they moved from Mexico to San Francisco, we came here to the Mission. We landed on Valencia Street. Grew up in the Mission. And so it's changed throughout the years. But the struggles seem to stay the same, or, for some people they don't improve, for some they do. As a community organizer, what do you see is the need for this community to keep moving forward?
Housing is one of the biggest concerns that we have had in our struggle. We first got, first round gentrification was when the dot-com boom came. Then tech came, and the Mission was hit the hardest than any other neighborhood, because all these folks wanted to come live in a cool, cultural, urban experience. And we formed, our Mission No Eviction. We fought a lot of evictions. We were able to save 17,000 people from getting evicted, but we lost 10,000 people, right? And so when you look at, well, where did those 10,000 people go, right? They're living in garages, they're living in backyards, they're living in tents, they're living in RVs. And look what's happening right now with the RVs. You can't even live in an RV now. They're forbidding people from parking on the street. But they forgot that these people are living in RVs because they got gentrified and they got evicted. And so for me, housing is the number one issue.
So Rodrigo, you're part of the Human Rights Commission.
No.
Yeah, no more?
No.
Okay, but when you were on the commission, what kind of work would you do for the community, representing the community?
My work was similar to the work I do at Carnaval or in the Mission, whereas I was like a liaison, between the needs of not only the Mission, but at that point, San Francisco, the people, and their connection to City Hall, because there's always a disconnect, unfortunately, right? Access to resources, a platform for a voice. And so because of my relationships, especially with the Latino community, And as a commissioner at the time, I can bring those voices to the forefront to present in front of the commission and in front of the staff on how either policies, locally, statewide, or federally, were impacting them, and how the Human Rights Commission and other departments could better support their needs. And so, in a way, kind of reduce the gap, and that sometimes that wall, invisible wall that exists between sometimes the people and local government. And so myself, like other commissioners at the time, some that are still there, some that are not anymore, we're that bridge. And that's been my role. I mean, Roberto, I learned from Roberto and other folks, is creating bridges so that those who are underserved or whose voice is not often elevated, is heard.
What are the results that you've seen? What are the fruits of the hard work and the involvement and the community work? How do you see those fruits, and how do you feel about those fruits, and how that's going to impact the community and nurture the next generation?
I mean, it really starts with leadership, Roberto. We started with a plan, a 5-year strategic plan on how we were going to grow as an organization, and then how we were going to have a home. And we've completed all those goals. And you set those goals. And this is not only just for CANA, the Latino community, the mission, but San Francisco and beyond, is you plan. You plant seeds and you execute them. It's like you write a contract with yourself. And that's what you've taught me. If you say you're gonna do it, that's step one. How are you gonna plan to do it? How are you gonna make sure that you get to that point where you've seen the fruits of your labor blossom? And it's okay if it's a 1-year goal, a 3, a 5, or 10. And I'm at the 10-year goal with you here, and I've seen all of the different results. And it has to do with that. And when I talk about the future of CANA, is if we continue that ethos, there's no way we're gonna fail. There's no way we're gonna fail with your ethos, Roberto, being ingrained into these walls, because all these people are the reason why we're here. Some of them alive, some of them are in the spirit world. And they are, with us, and they're gonna shape the next generation, like I was shaped with the Mission Culture Center. Now we have Casa del Carnaval, and I have a daughter. And so, thank you.
If I could add on to that, I came in towards the tail end of their strategic plan, but, Roberto has always told us to plan, right? We don't just set goals, we have to set the steps for them. For me, one highlight that we've actually done this past summer was we did a summer youth art program for middle schoolers. It was something I know I've been dreaming about for at least 2 years. It's something, I wanted to happen, and I pushed for it, and we finally were able to get funding for it, and it was really wholesome. So we taught it was middle schoolers, which is already a very difficult age range to work with. It's a blessed age where they're starting to get their independence, but they're starting to get their independence. And so we taught them drumming, cooking, and we partnered with Tradición Peruana. So they taught them how to do cajon and dance. And the first week, they were middle schoolers. They were too cool for everything. They didn't really want to participate, but it was really nice by the time they did a final showcase for their parents, and it was really heartwarming for me to see them motivating each other in their own practices, where I didn't really have to be there. They were making leaders out of themselves, saying like, hey, we're going to present in front of our parents, like, let's go hard. And it was just really emotional, because for a lot of them, this was their first time ever being in an arts program. For a lot of them, this was their first time dancing. And parents were coming up after and were like, hey, like the only time I've ever seen my kid move anything has been his thumbs to like scroll through social media, you know? And they're like, I can't believe you got him to, you know, to do cajon. They're like, I can't believe you got him to dance, you know, like they were really like amazed. And you know, it's those little starter programs that you start to see. It's a little thing, right? You know, we only had them for 4 weeks, but that little impact that they had is going to help them in the future, right? In those 4 weeks, they were already developing the leadership skills within themselves. With the cooking class, you know, there was kids who were taking initiatives with the cooking. There was one day where our chef couldn't be here, so I was leading it, unfortunately for them. But the kids were the ones stepped up. They're like, no, you're cutting it wrong, and they told me how to cut it. And so it's like those little moments, you know, where they never would have been exposed to it had it not been for a program like that. But they started developing the skill sets for them. They started getting interested in it. And so, you know, again, that took 2 years worth of, you know, advocacy with ourselves, with agencies to try to fund it. And again, seeing it come to kind of fruition, it was really just heartwarming. And also just seeing like the joy. And they were all excited afterwards. Like, you know how little kids scream, like as soon as they finished like their performance, they were like, ee! You know, it was really cute. Like they were little kids again for like a split second.
Mm-hmm. So I want to bring it back to the local. What's in the future for CANA, for Carnaval, for the programs that are ushered under CANA? What's the future? What do you see it like? What's the next step?
One is our focus right now is immigration, you know, number one and most important, right? And serving that community. Just it's another COVID, but in a different form, because people are feeling anxiety, they're feeling scared, they're feeling fear, depression, and those are all symptoms that we learned, right, that during the pandemic, people were impacted. Not that any other race wasn't, because just being locked down, right, really impacted the mental health of everybody. And that's why we created this space and called it the Indigenous Peoples Cultural Arts Healing Center, because during the pandemic we learned, and everything that we do is driven by what we hear and what we feel that is impacting our community, and we stay true to that, right? And so right now the immigration, you know, issue is the number one issue impacting our immigrant brothers and sisters, right? So we need to be there for them, right? And so that means, you know, with food, right, that we know that there's gonna be a rise in food. People aren't gonna be able to pay their rent, right? And legal, you know, separation of families, right? And so that's one piece that we're really working on, right? I really believe that the other piece is that here we're ramping up to really train people to become promotores that are culturally trained to deal with healing, right? We just finished doing a training for 30 promotoras y promotoras that in partnership with Visión y Compromiso, right? They did the training for us. And because that's the other thing, is that there's not enough mental health workers in the city and in the country, right? And so we're looking at creating a whole new model, right, of having people who are going to be able to bring you here to the center and invite you to a talking circle, right, or a drum circle, or, you know, utilizing acupuncture, right, or providing, you know, hierbas, right, that calms your anxiety, right, and so if you look at going back to indigenous, you know, healing tradiciones, right, there was never no drugs, and today with this Western doctors, right, are prescribing Oxycontin and other kinds of drugs. And you know that studies show that you take this drug, it's going to probably affect your liver, as an example. And now you're taking a drug for that, and then that pill is going to have side effect to your, this and that. Recently, a gentleman, I learned from him that he was taking 15 different pills. And he said, and he had heard me talk about not taking pills, right? And he says, help me, So we got him off of 10. He's down to 5. And we hope, one day he gets off, doesn't have to take that. But at one point, there was no drugs. It was all hierbas, natural herbs, and natural, ceremonias and sweat lodges and whatnot, right, that you participate in to heal, right? The pharmaceuticals companies, they're the biggest drug dealers. And it's all about money, and it's legal money, right? And so we need to get away with that. And that's one of the things that we're doing here is whether you, Chinese, if you study there, you know what I'm saying? Indigenous traditions, to a Peruvian, to a Cuban. In Cuba, when I went to Cuba, there was over 1,000 hierbas that they grow in Cuba, right? Their Walgreens is cremas, tés, y hierbas. It's just, so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to go back to healing people naturally, right? And empowering you to, be healthy.
I want to, talk about, you've done so much in the community throughout the years. You've empowered so many youth. You've influenced. You've taken a lot of people under your wing. And you were recently received the Reverend Cecil Williams Legacy Award for all your work at Glide. How does that feel? How does it feel to be recognized for all the work? Because it's you, but it's also those around you that provide you support. How does that feel?
I cried. I've cried a couple of times when they first told me, and it's because I know that's my brother. Cecil Williams, man. I met him when I was a kid. I mean, he influenced me in the whole, like since and the Lord said, but in a whole other way, because he's black and he's a reverend, and he got me go to church, and that was the first time I went to a gospel church, and man, just to be in there, and I get goosebumps just thinking. I mean, you get goosebumps from hearing that the soul, it just gets inside your spirit, your mind, your body. You just like, and just him, as a human being that talked about you gotta love everybody. You gotta be colorblind, and you gotta, and then how he had, and he turned me on about the homelessness, right? Not, and that's what Clyde does, provide, the unconditional love they give homeless people and drug addicts and alcoholics, and and so I did a lot of work with him, and so when they called me and told me that was God, I was like, well,
you deserve it. Thank you for everything you've done for the community, not just the Latino community, but all communities in San Francisco and around San Francisco. And I want to thank you all for being here. I'd like to ask you if you have any final thoughts. Rodrigo, let's go with you.
No, it's just our what anchors us, anchors me, is our motto of La Cultura Cura. And so whether it be in health, economic recovery, events, culture's pushing us forward. It's helping us reinvent ourselves and define ourselves.
Roselyn?
I think we're also adding on to that, something that I appreciate about Roberto and just CANA as a whole has been teaching the next generation. And so definitely moving to keep our traditions alive, our culture alive, especially as we get like further and further into like several generations of Latin Americans being here.
Roberto, last words?
Hope. They give me hope.
Thank you very much.